I'm just going to come in and say it. Workplace drama is not about the job, okay? It's not. It is not about the meeting that could have been an email. It's not about the person who took too long to respond to you on Slack. It's not even about that passive aggressive comment that your coworker made on a call. It is about unhealed wounds. It is about unchecked egos. It is about poor emotional regulation. It is about a lack of gratitude and humility. It's about trauma responses. And did I mention unhealed wounds? All showing up in business casual, but masked as professionalism. Today, we're going to talk about why your job isn't toxic, but the people there might be carrying around things that are, and that includes you. I'm not here to judge you. I'm here to help. I just want us to release ourselves from all of this negative crap that comes with a corporate job. And I think we have a lot more control over it than we even realize. So, you know what time it is. It's time to grab a drink, grab a snack, get comfortable. It's time to tune in and shift with me. Welcome back to the On Some Real Shift podcast, where I have real conversations on what it takes to shift your mindset and uplevel your emotional and spiritual life. I'm your host, Vanessa. I'm a certified life coach. I do mindset coaching. I am a Reiki and sound bath healer, but most importantly, I am a student of the universe, or the university, as I like to call it. Welcome back, friends. So let's get to some of the surface level narratives that I think the majority of us have heard. For instance, my boss is such a micromanager, or he or she never listens, or this place is draining my soul. And I am here to tell you I have felt or thought all of those things at some point in my 20 plus year career. So I will be the first person to tell you that your feelings are valid. But I want you to ask yourself some questions when you are feeling these things, when you're experiencing certain behaviors at work. Are you actually naming behaviors, or are you avoiding accountability? And what I mean by this is I've seen over and over and over again, especially in high achieving environments, high achieving work environments, we're not just showing up to the job with our resumes and our titles and our degrees, okay? We are showing up to work with unprocessed trauma, unhealed wounds, abandonment issues, self-esteem issues, imposter syndrome, our inner child still looking for validation, fears of not being enough or overfunctioning to be a team player or to be liked, to be valued. It plays out in the smallest ways that we don't even realize. Have you ever felt yourself feeling triggered because your boss asked for updates, for instance? If so, that could be because you associate being micromanaged with your lack of autonomy growing up, for instance. Or even further, it makes you feel like you're not trusted. Maybe your parents never trusted you no matter how honest you were. Maybe you're avoiding a difficult conversation with a colleague. Why? Because confrontation feels like danger. Confrontation feels like a bad word. Maybe that's because growing up, any type of disagreement, any type of conversation or confrontation ended up in a war zone. And all of it's valid. You're just responding from a wound in a new environment. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about trauma responses showing up in business casual. I think that there's this misconception that because somebody has like a prestigious title, degrees, accomplishments, that they automatically know how to people. That with their degree came some emotional maturity and healing that like we don't see, but it's just there. And that's not what happens. Emotional immaturity hides behind performance every single day. I can tell you, as somebody who has worked in all sorts of environments, I've always surrounded myself with high achievers just because of the nature of what I do. In all of my positions, I am always next to some kind of upper level leadership. And in some of these rooms, not all, but in some of these rooms, I have heard people speak to each other with the most disrespect. And I'm laughing, but it's actually not funny. But I have heard people say some wild things to each other that like, if you were not in a work environment, I don't know how that would go down. I don't know how it would be tolerated. And it's seemingly normal. And it's just kind of like slid under the rug because they have a title, right? And listen, not all the times. I've been lucky to work with some grade A leaders, okay? but I've seen it. So some examples I would say of emotional immaturity in the workplace is avoidance, for instance. It's not just bad communication, it's a freeze response, right? Or micromanaging or hypercontrol. It's not just a management style, it is a trauma adaptation. People pleasing is not just being a team player. It's fawning, like rooted in fear of like rejection, for instance, or punishment, or just not being liked. Explosive reactions surrounding feedback, that's often a deep wound associated with self-worth. And here's where it gets tricky because I often see that these types of behaviors are rewarded. We reward overworking. We promote perfectionists. We applaud self-sacrificing behavior and we call it being dedicated. But the reality is if you are constantly operating from your nervous system and not your values, it's not a job, it's a trauma loop. And eventually you will either burn out or blow up, right? Let's talk about the word triggered for a second. And I know I have a whole episode on it, but I want to talk about it in the context of what we're talking about. Being triggered doesn't mean that somebody always did something wrong, right? Being triggered, it means that something inside of you is being activated more often than not without your conscious permission. Let's say, if every time your manager gives you feedback, you start spiraling into self-doubt, if every time your coworker doesn't include you in a call or an email, you feel disrespected, if every time somebody sets a boundary, you feel abandoned, or you take it personal in some sort of way, that's not the job talking. That's your nervous system. That is your past. That is a belief that has not been fully healed yet. We really have to stop spiritualizing our careers and stop bypassing the actual inner work, the emotional work that no one wants to do. Because as I've said before, your triggers are messengers. They are keys. They are pieces of information that say, hey, there's something here that needs attention, that needs more work, that needs TLC. The drama is the symptom. The wound is the root. You know, I mean, think about it. If you have these unhealed wounds within your regular life, within your real life outside of work, what makes you think that all of a sudden, because you put on the outfit and show up to the workspace, that you're automatically going to know how to process these same types of behaviors, but in a different environment? That's not how it works. Healing happens with repeated behaviors over time. So if we're not healing outside of work, we don't just show up to work healed all of a sudden. If we have poor emotional regulation at home, you're going to have poor emotional regulation at work. If you have poor boundaries outside of your home life, then you're probably going to have poor boundaries at work. If you are not able to have a constructive conversation with somebody without insulting them, without belittling them, or without taking every single word personally outside of work, then you're probably not going to be able to show up to work and handle it any differently. This is a small reason why I have gotten into this line of work, because we don't prioritize our inner wellness enough, right? We are taught to be these overproducing machines and just like we can show up to work as a unemotional robot. But not enough people talk about just how valuable emotional and spiritual resilience and regulation is to our lives holistically. I can tell you, before I got into this line of work, I have sat in some meetings where people would be very explosive, not towards me, but towards others in the room. And I would leave those meetings with secondhand embarrassment. I would feel bad and I would want to tiptoe around that person later, and it really would significantly alter the way that I communicate with them. I'd feel anxious, scared, nervous, whatever. Now, I look at that person with a very different lens. I'm not scared of you, intimidated by you. I actually have a lot of empathy for you because I automatically see the immense amount of emotional immaturity or pain that they're carrying. And I don't even say that with judgment because I have carried a ton of emotional immaturity and pain in my life. And so I know what it feels like. But when you see it show up at work, you're like, wow, you think this is normal. And yeah, and I look at them with a lens of empathy. So anyway, so what do we do with this information, right? The way that we hear people, the way that we interact with people is highly dependent on what our internal worlds are like. If you are somebody who is confident and comfortable with constructive feedback outside of work, you will probably have a much easier time at work when it comes to be review season, for instance, and it's time for you to be evaluated, right? Or just in a simple exchange with you and a manager or a colleague where they're sharing, hey, let's do this differently next time. This should be this way. This should be that way, right? Conversely, when you understand that so many people are just adults with unhealed child wounds, you hear people differently. You take things less personal because you understand that they're speaking from a hurt place. So how do we shift it? It starts with self-responsibility, with accountability. And I'm not saying that everything is your fault, but I am saying that your healing is your responsibility. You can't control your boss. You can't control your coworkers, but you can control how you respond to them. You can control your awareness. You can control your regulation, and you can shift how you respond when something within you gets activated. And leaders, let me talk to y'all for a second. If you are managing a team, you are not just managing deliverables. You are managing humans with real emotional ecosystems that exist whether they're in or out of work. If you want better performance, build emotional safety. You want less drama? Then be the example of emotional regulation. You want better retention? Then start recognizing when your team needs more compassion and not just KPIs. Workplaces that do not account for humanity will continue to be a revolving door. And it works for some companies. But that in itself is expensive. Burnout is not always a workload issue. Sometimes it's a values issue. Sometimes it's a boundaries issue, a healing issue. I'm probably going to get on your nerves with this, but honestly, the workplace itself can be a mirror, okay? Every environment that you find yourself in is giving you an opportunity to look at yourself, to learn something about yourself, if you're willing to look. Why is that? Because it's stripping you of your normal comforts. It's putting you in proximity to differing personalities that you probably wouldn't be around if you didn't have to work. It places demands on your time, on your energy, and your boundaries. So what happens? We get annoyed with our team. We feel misunderstood by our boss. We find ourselves frustrated, exhausted, or even checked out. But what if instead of asking, why is this happening to me? Or complaining about how bad your job sucks? Some of them do, okay? That's valid. But instead of asking, why is this happening to me? Ask, what is this showing me about me? What kind of energy am I bringing into the room? How do I typically respond when I feel overlooked or not heard, undervalued? If you're assuming the worst about people, is it because you're projecting old wounds and fears onto them? What childhood patterns are being reenacted in this workplace? What part of me benefits from staying in this loop of frustration? Sometimes we stay in dysfunction just because it's familiar, right? Because clarity would require change, and change requires boundaries and action, and boundaries require self-worth. It's never just about the job, y'all. Let's talk about workplace culture because people love to talk about this. And again, it's valid, it's fair, but people love to throw around the phrase toxic culture at work. Or we're a family here, which to me kind of sounds like the same thing. Think about that. When you normalize gossip, avoid confrontation, praise burnout, and punish boundaries, you're not building culture. You are maintaining and reinforcing dysfunction. So let me ask you some real questions. What kind of culture are you co-signing by staying? Where have you become emotionally numb to keep the peace? Who do you become in order to feel safe or valued at work? And is that version of you aligned to your truth, aligned to who you really are or want to be? Because here's the thing, not everybody's going to do their healing. We cannot police or chase people to do their healing. People who are not ready or willing just simply aren't going to be ready or willing, and that is their journey, and that is okay. That is a part of the universe. Sometimes people are here just to show us what it looks like when you are not choosing healing. Okay? Not everybody is going to regulate themselves or communicate consciously. Hell, you might not some days. But that doesn't mean you can't. Your boundaries can shift the energy of an entire meeting. Your emotional regulation can create the safety, the emotional safety for somebody else to be heard, to be real. Your self-awareness can become a permission slip for authenticity. Culture is not a mission statement. It is what you do. It is what you allow. It is what you reinforce. It is what you embody every single day. The workplace does not need more polished professionals. We need more healed humans. We need more authenticity. We need more transparency, vulnerability, healing, emotional regulation. That's what we need. We're not going to solve emotional dysfunction in like just a workshop. We need self-awareness. We need nervous system literacy. We need less pretending and more processing. So the next time you catch yourself in some workplace drama, pause, breathe, ask yourself, am I listening to this person? Am I processing this information through one of my wounds, through some of my trauma, unhealed trauma? Ask yourself, what parts of me are being activated right now? Where do I feel it in my body? And then ask yourself, where did I first learn to respond like this? What would my healed self do instead? How would my healed ears, heart, and spirit receive this information instead? We haven't even talked about how we don't even extend each other the grace to be human in the workspace, right? And how so many of us are dealing with so many complex and devastating issues outside of work. If we just treated each other with some more compassion, that alone would fix so much. But anyway, I digress. Ask yourself those questions. That's where the shift happens. Not in the boardroom, but in your body, in your self-awareness, in your decision to stop allowing your wounds to speak before your wisdom. I do want to say that none of this is an excuse for anybody's shitty work behavior. So let me just say that disrespect and all that stuff, it's not cool. But what I'm saying is just somebody acting unhinged at work, the problem is probably not you. The problem is what they got going on internally and what you may have triggered in them. Just extend that person peace, grace, gratitude, and move on. If this hit home for you, share it with a coworker, share it with a friend. Shit, send it to your boss if you're feeling bold. And remember, work is not just what you do. It is how you show up to what you do. The drama might not be your fault, but the healing is your power. As always, I am super grateful for your time. I will catch y'all on the next one. Peace.